clothes that change completely from one second to the next, things that shouldn't be there appearing on screen, characters changing places, things that simply disappear and then reappear again, and many other mistakes you hadn't noticed in the movie Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix.
Hey wizards, how's it going? It's no secret that productions, big or small, make mistakes.
It's something really common. There are continuity errors, objects that shouldn't appear showing up in the scene, or things like that. Obviously, these mistakes don't ruin the movies, especially because the ones I'm talking about are the kind you really have to look for to find. They're not that noticeable.
Initially, people don't notice, but it's fun to watch and spot mistakes. Our first mistake is already visible.
At the playground, Harry sits alone until Dudley arrives and they argue briefly. Notice the patterns on Harry's cousin's shorts when he's at the playground, specifically there, that circle on his left leg. Now, look at those same patterns.
After running away and entering the tunnel, they come out completely changed. The number 5 disappeared from the side. The circle that was higher up, a bit on the lower thigh, has now moved down and is practically on the knee. Putting them side by side, you can see they're totally different shorts. The big question is how he changed shorts while running. When Harry threatens his cousin with the wand, putting it to his neck, a newspaper flies behind Harry and goes toward the fence. And then notice that it gets stuck on it. When the clouds cover the sky, the newspaper that was on the fence is back where it was before, and it's pushed by the wind again. But later, when the camera moves up and shows a wider angle, the newspaper is gone.
Now, in the scene where Harry and Dudley enter the tunnel, they come running, slow down there, and stop when they stop, and the scene is shown from their point of view.
Notice on the right side the graffiti with the name Jim. You saw that neither of them is even close to it. However, when the camera changes angles, showing Harry and Dudley, they are completely next to that same graffiti,
positioned in a different spot from the previous shot. Now, notice this mistake. When the Dementor lifts Harry by the neck,
in one shot, his feet are hitting against the wall, but in the next shot, his feet are crossed and completely still. And the change is very abrupt, from one shot to the next.
While Harry is suspended by the Dementor, you can notice that he is positioned to the right side of the word Stark, which is graffitied on the wall.
Notice that, at the point where he is, the word had already ended, and he is about a hand's width from the letter K. But after he falls, when he taps his wand on the Dementor's neck, he's positioned at the beginning of the word, and he fell to the other side.
So, he should be farther away than he already was when the Dementor was hanging him by the neck.
But obviously, since the scene is filmed in several shots, in several takes, things end up being put together in post-production, and these little mistakes end up happening.
Harry's wand, when it falls to the ground, also falls in a certain position. You can see that it falls exactly on top of the floor line, in the same direction as the line. But when Harry goes to pick it up, it's in a completely different position, lying across the floor line. After Harry casts the Patronus, scaring off his Dementor, the scene is shown where Dudley is being attacked, and Harry is in the background, kind of out of focus. You see that he's getting up, and you notice that when he's getting up, his wand is down, his hand is down. He even supports himself on the ground to get up, and then he stands up and everything, and he's holding his wand down.
But when it shows the next shot, he's got his wand pointed at the place.
My God, I just slapped Dragon here. Sorry, Dragon. Is he pointing his wand to where his Patronus was? As if he got up like this, with his hand pointing backwards. And here, at this moment, when Harry is getting there, running towards Dudley, you can see the mark of the microphone wire on the shirt, right under the shirt of the actor who plays Dudley. This next mistake here is a script error. When Harry meets Mrs. Fig, he's surprised that she knows more than he thought, right? She knows about Dumbledore, she knows about Dementors, and she talks about Cedric's death last year. She says exactly like this: he killed the Diggory boy last year. But the thing is, Cedric hadn't been killed last year. It had only been about 5 weeks since Cedric died, because he was killed on June 26, 1995.
And this scene, this moment that Mrs. Fig talks about, takes place on August 2nd, 1995.
And it's not that she's referring to the previous school year, because if it were the previous school year, that would be fine. But the term would have to be school year. But she doesn't use the term school year either in the original language or in the dubbed movie. So the viewer understands that, well, it was last year. There's a 1-year difference between the events of the previous movie and this one, when in reality, it was only 5 weeks. This next mistake here is a chronological error. Before Harry goes inside with Dudley, Petunia watches the weather forecast on a flat-screen television. The problem is that flat-screen TVs only started to appear in the early 2000s. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is set in 1995 and 1996.
At that moment, being August 2nd, 1995.
There were no flat screens. And the same thing happens with the Dursleys' car. It has a license plate model that was only used starting in 2006.
Nearly 11 years after the story's events in the movie.
And starting from Order of the Phoenix, the movies had zero concern for the chronology of the books.
So, they simply set the movies in the same time period as when they were being filmed. And that's something I'm really happy about with the series. Because, from all the materials that have already come out, you can see that they're paying a lot of attention to the chronology of the story. The story takes place there, even in 1981 when the Potters are killed. Events are shown, such as his entry into the Leaky Cauldron, a Nirvana poster from the 1991 tour showing what's happening that year. So that's a detail I'm really enjoying seeing.
The series is taking a direction the movies, starting with Order of the Phoenix, didn't. Do you remember who began directing from then? Yes, Harry Potter. It was him.
David Yates, by the way. Let me show you a gift I got from a subscriber at Comic-Con Experience. Look, it's a poster of David Yates, and it says, "Great ideas will come to light." And it's David Yates and the worst crap he did in the Harry Potter movies. I got it from a subscriber who knows about my feelings for David Yates, knows how I complain about him and some of his choices. I keep it here since it was one of the coolest gifts I've gotten. The next mistake is a continuity error. When Dudley and Harry come in, you can quickly see that Dudley has his right arm around Harry, while the scene is in the wide shot, right? Then, when the camera zooms in on them, after the instant camera cut, his arm is now at his side, and the arm around Harry is the left one. And it's really quick. This next mistake is also a continuity error. Have you noticed how Vernon's expression changes between scenes when he says Harry finally drove Dudley crazy?
First, he rolls his eyes, looking cross-eyed and nauseous. After the cut, he appears normal but still looks a bit sick. And Petunia's arm also changes position around Dudley. It goes from his shoulder to his head from one cut to the next.
This next mistake here is what we can call a location error, and this kind of mistake happens a lot because of the use of computer-generated imagery in some cases.
When the owl delivers the Ministry of Magic letter, it hits the wall and falls. Harry looks in all directions, out of sync. First, when it passes by, he looks at the opening, while it's already up ahead. When the owl hits the ceiling and falls, Harry looks down before the owl actually falls. Then someone might say, "Don't look."
But he was looking at the letter that fell before. No, he wasn't, because the letter falls on the couch, which is on the other side. He really looks at the floor, where the owl is going to fall.
When the Dursleys go out to take Dudley to the doctor, there's a flower pot there, a hanging one, right?
At the front door, and you can see that the flowers are predominantly white and some are red.
Later, when the advance guard goes to pick up Harry, they pass by the same place.
All the flowers are red and smaller than the ones that appeared in the previous scene. After Harry knocks down the portrait of his parents, he picks it up and puts it back on the dresser.
You can see that the wand changes position in the wider shot. The wand is a certain distance from the portrait, but when the scene zooms in, the wand is closer to the portrait than before. When the angle widens again, the wand is farther from the portrait as Harry leaves the Dursleys' house with the advance guard. When Kingsley says Dumbledore got Harry a hearing there, meaning he hadn't been expelled yet, you can see on the left window, the production lighting reflecting there, on the window glass, still at that moment. There, still, the advance guard summons the brooms. Harry is holding the firebolt at the curve of the handle, but in the next shot, his hand is much higher on the handle than before. And the same thing happens with Kingsley's broom. With Tonks, her hands change position from one shot to another, and these position changes happen in many, many moments. Don't think it's over. There are still many more changes that will show up here in this episode, and the next one is when the advance guard arrives there, in front of Grimmauld Place. When they're shown from the front, Harry and Tonks are really close to Alastor Moody, but when they're shown from behind, they're much farther apart. Besides that, when there are close-ups of Harry, Shacklebolt now appears directly behind him, but in the shots from behind, Kingsley is behind Moody. When Harry talks to Hermione and Ron at the Order of the Phoenix headquarters, Hermione's hair covers the left side of her polo shirt at one point, and in the next scene, you can see the logo because her hair is on her back, but seconds later, her hair is covering the shirt and the logo again. In the scene when they're at the table talking, right? Harry is talking to them there about everything that's going on. He's holding the Daily Prophet in his hand, and, man, the newspaper keeps changing position in Harry's hand all the time. At one moment he's holding it up, then it's lying on the table, and these moments keep changing. When it should be a continuous scene. If he's holding it, he should keep holding it while talking, as Harry and Mr. Weasley go through the subway turnstile.
Notice that Harry reaches into his pocket 3 times to get the ticket. It shows them from 3 angles. First the side, then the front, then the side again.
Besides that, this guy in the beige jacket who goes through the turnstile right next to Arthur goes through twice.
First when the camera is showing Harry and Arthur from the side, and then when it's showing them from the front. And also in this scene, there's a chronological error.
These subway turnstiles show a card system there, known as the Oyster card, which is like a single ticket here in Brazil. But this system was only launched in the United Kingdom in June 2003. The movie is set in 1995 and 1996. That day is exactly August 12, 1995. When Harry and Mr. Weasley are crossing the street there to get to the phone booth that gives access to the Ministry of Magic, notice that there are puddles of water. The problem is that when the scene is shown from a wider angle, those puddles of water simply disappear. During Harry's hearing at the Ministry of Magic, Minister Cornelius Fudge says the name of the Wizengamot wrong. The Wizengamot is the Supreme Court of Wizards, but instead of saying Wizengamot, he says Wysenagamot. He adds an A when saying it, and that was a mistake by the actor. On the walkway at King's Cross, while escorting Harry to platform 9 3/4, notice how Molly's distance shifts dramatically between camera angles. When Sirius, in dog form, passes by her, he then passes right next to Harry as well. Very close. They're really close together, and in the close-up shot, Molly is right behind Harry, but when the scene is wider, she's much farther away, like way in the back. Another continuity error happens when Sirius is talking to Harry in that little waiting room. Right there.
And then you can notice a poster on the wall, and on that poster there's a logo right there, in the bottom right corner of the poster.
That logo belongs to Network Rail, which manages most of the United Kingdom's railway network. The problem is that it only came into existence in 2002.
At the time when the movie takes place, the company responsible was the private company Railtrack, which was removed and replaced by Network Rail.
But in 1995, that logo shouldn't be there. When Harry sees the Thestral for the first time, they're waiting for the carriage, right? Harry sees the Thestral.
It's odd. It briefly shows Neville looking confused, but that shouldn't happen since he can see Thestrals. But the movie makes you believe that he's confused too. Doesn't he understand what Harry is talking about in the carriage?
When Hermione introduces Luna, she's facing Neville, and then she turns to Hermione. When the scene cuts, Luna faces Neville. Then in the next cut, she's facing Hermione again. At the start of Term Feast, Harry and Seamus sit slightly apart because Seamus is upset, thinking Harry lied and was influenced by the media. However, when Umbridge is giving her speech, the distance between them disappears and they're side by side, still in the Great Hall, at the start of the school year. When Dumbledore begins his speech, you can see that Fred and George are sitting right there in front, and they're the 5th and 6th students on the bench. You can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Fred, 6, George, or reverse it, it doesn't matter.
But when the scene changes angles, they're not where they were. Other students are in their places.
Let's count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Where are Fred and George? But when the scene angle changes, they're back. When Harry arrives at the Gryffindor common room, and there's kind of a tense atmosphere building up, right? People are staring at him and all. There's music playing. People are listening to a song on the radio. There are two problems in this scene. First, it's a Muggle song on a radio, which should be a wizarding station. It's not just about taste. There could be a Muggle-born student there who likes Muggle music. But the problem is that a wizarding radio station wouldn't play a Muggle song. They have separate radio stations and use different methods. Muggles use technology. Wizards use magic. So, a Muggle song shouldn't play on a wizard station.
Another issue is that the timeline is also incorrect.
This song that's playing is called Boys Will Be Boys by the band The Ordinary Boys. But it was only released in 2005, 10 years after the moment this scene takes place. I don't want to repeat myself about David Yates, but I don't think he knew. When Simus and Harry argue, notice that the first time Simus is shown from behind, his shirt sticks out of his sweater in a specific way. But then, after the camera shows Harry and Ron, it returns to Simus from behind again. The shirt is completely different. Look, put them side by side, Eric, so people can see how different it was.
And speaking of shirts that change shape, Harry's shirt doesn't just change shape at this moment. No, it changes completely.
Harry is going to lie down there, then he snaps at Ron, right? So he goes to lie down there. He has dreams, right? He has nightmares there, where he's having visions of Voldemort. And then you notice that he's shown wearing a shirt. He's wearing a blue striped shirt with a regular collar, right? But in another shot, he's wearing a different shirt. The shirt is a different color and the collar has buttons, dude. They really took a shot from another moment in Harry's movie where he's having a nightmare and put it there as if no one would notice. When Dolores Umbridge enters the classroom, she magically writes on the board. Notice how the writing size changes between shots, right?
When she writes with magic, it's a large size, but when the shot changes, the writing is slightly smaller.
You can see the distance from the edges is quite different, right? Eric puts them side by side so you can notice. Harry already gets a detention as soon as he arrives, right? And then he goes to Umbridge's office. Notice that she sets it up, right? At first, when it shows there, she puts sugar in her tea, and then, after stirring, she puts the spoon on the saucer. When Harry enters the room, the spoon is there, visible on the saucer. But when the teacher says that he would write some words for her, the cup appears without the spoon. And then, when she says that he wouldn't need a quill because he would use one of hers, the spoon reappears on the saucer.
Umbridge also has a portrait of Fudge there on her desk. And notice that when Harry enters the room and Umbridge greets him, the portrait is facing the wall at the back of the room.
But when the scene shows the professor's point of view, the portrait is completely turned toward her, in the center of the desk. And then, when the scene changes angles and Harry is about to start writing on the parchment, the portrait goes back to its original position. And, speaking of position, when Harry starts writing, the parchment, it's almost centered with the tablecloth. So much so that the writing is at the top, and you can see it by the curve of the tablecloth there. But when the camera zooms in on Harry's hand, the parchment is positioned at the bottom of the tablecloth. Completely different from before, in the Gryffindor common room. When Hermione and Ron talk to Harry and notice the marks on his hand, watch before Hermione sits down. There's a ribbon. It's a pink ribbon on her blouse on the left side. You can see it's hanging over her shoulder, but when she sits, the ribbon is suddenly in a different spot, hanging forward and straight. And it's not like the ribbon was just falling and ended up in that position. It was on her shoulder in a way that it couldn't have fallen the way she sat down. You can tell these scenes were filmed at different times, especially when Trelawney is fired and kicked out of the castle, making you feel sorry for her. Did you notice that the professor's suitcase is placed in the same direction as the others? And the professor even slightly trips over it? But when the angle changes, the suitcase is in a different spot. It wasn't due to the trip, since it was just a small stumble. Filch puts up several decrees on the wall, and you notice that he uses a ladder to put up these decrees, right?
He starts by putting the decrees up high. After Dumbledore tells Minerva to take Trelawney inside, Harry tries to talk to the headmaster and get his attention. The decrees on the wall are only on the lower part and at a height where a ladder isn't needed when Harry talks to Sirius in the fireplace. At certain moments, you can see the reflection of the flame in his eyes. When he gets closer and the camera zooms in, you can see the glasses have no lenses and the reflection vanishes. The next mistake is a grammar error. When Nigel stands in the room, he needs to distract himself with the spell after the show. Behind them, a mirror holds some newspaper clippings. One says disappearances in English, but the grammar is incorrect.
It's written disappearances, where after the R, there should be an A, but there's an E in disappearances, because the correct spelling would be disappearances, not disappearances.
Another mistake that happens at this point, right there in the room of requirement, is the show wand changing position when the members of the army are clapping. In the first take, Cho Chang's wand points down, but in the next cut, it's up as the students leave the room of requirement. Zacharias Smith and Michael Corner walk past Harry, wishing him Merry Christmas, then are seen passing by again in the next cut. The scene displays two angles of the same moment, but there's a timing error in the editing.
Start the scene after the two have already passed Harry, so they don't walk by twice, wishing Merry Christmas when the scene changes.
When Harry is in Snape's office, he's there for occlumency. Poor guy. You can't even call it learning. Did you notice Harry's sweat stain changes size? It's large at first, then smaller. And another mistake in this scene is the shape of the window. You notice that the window has a kind of diamond pattern, right? But the glass only has a cross in the middle, right? Do you see that the window has it on both panes? But when the scene goes, the camera moves to the window and there's a transition that pulls back and goes outside. That cross disappears. It just vanishes. When Harry goes for Christmas break over at Sirius's house, he's looking at the family tree. And then, when he enters the room for the first time, a burned name appears there. Phineas. That's the son of Phineas Nigellus Black, his son who was burned off the family tree. He defended the rights of Muggleborns, those born to Muggles. But the problem is that his name is spelled wrong. His name is Phineas, just like his father's, Phineas Nigellus Black, not Phineas. In Brazil, the translation changed to Phineas, but Phineus in the original language is Phineas, with PH, spelled Phineas. And then on the family tree, it's written incorrectly there, still on the family tree. When Sirius is showing it to Harry, he points to Bellatrix, and she's right next to Andromeda, right? You notice that Andromeda was burned and there's a picture of Bellatrix right next to her? But when the camera angle changes, Bellatrix's face disappears. Only the name remains below, just the strip with the name. And it's not that Harry is in front and you can't see it. It really disappears. When Ginny casts her Patronus there, in the Dumbledore's army class, you can quickly see in the mirror behind her a crew member passing by with a camera. I don't know if it's a camera or some equipment. It's some kind of gear. You can't really tell if it's a camera, but he walks by there. You can tell it's a crew member because his clothes are completely different. He's wearing a short-sleeved black shirt. When the Weasleys put on a show to leave the castle, the students go outside. Nigel changes position. Notice that in the scene where Flitwick is shown, Nigel is to the left of Harry, right next to him. But in the scene where it changes and shows Harry, Nigel is already to his right. Also in that scene, over in the corner, you can see a crew member there while the students are celebrating. And then the scene is shown from above. A crew member hid behind the pillar in the corner, thinking no one would notice, but everyone saw him. After Harry has the vision of Sirio being tortured, he immediately decides to investigate, to go after what's happening. And then he runs out. They go upstairs and Hermione warns him, but he says, "No, Hermione, he's my only family. Let's go, even if it's not true." Then they ask, "How will we do this? We're not using Umbridge's flu network, right?" Then they reach her office. But did you notice something? They were in uniform. They were wearing their Hogwarts robes. And when they enter Umbridge's office, they're wearing completely different clothes. They're wearing Muggle clothes, like that. If there was supposed to be a time skip at that moment, the scene got it wrong.
It completely failed, because it seems like they're going straight from the staircase to Umbridge's office because it was urgent, right? Harry wanted to save Sirius.
The time transition just showed Hogwarts outside, then they entered Umbridge's office. I found it weak and consider it a mistake.
After they're caught by Umbridge and taken to her office, the wands that are on her desk change position.
You notice that at first, the wand is crossed over the others, and then it's just next to them, like next to the others. And then it goes back to how it was before, after they meet on the bridge, right? The Weasleys manage to get rid of Umbridge and meet up with Harry and Hermione. Did you notice that Ginny's sweater string is longer and untied? Then, it's tied up nicely and shorter than before. In the Department of Mysteries, Neville sees Harry's prophecy, right? He sees the prophecy that mentioned Harry's name, and then he looks up at Talara, like this, upwards, right? It shows him from below, looking up. And Neville is tall, even taller than Harry, but when Harry goes to get the prophecy, it's at his height, at his eye level. That's a mistake. That shouldn't happen.
If Neville looks up, the shelf was high up, so for Harry, the shelf should also be high up when Bellatrix laughs, right?
She comes over mocking, saying that Harry knew how to play. You can tell the audio was added over it, because at the moment of the laugh, you see she's not laughing, and the line is completely out of sync, because it shows her saying, "Ah, little baby Potter." When the camera is close on her, it shows her talking.
Before that, she's coming up behind with her mouth closed. Another mistake at this point is a script error.
Bellatrix arrives there, and Neville immediately says Bellatrix Lestrange, and then she says Neville Longbottom, isn't it? How are your parents? How are your parents?
Bellatrix couldn't know Neville Longbottom. She was in prison for 16 years since Neville was a baby and wouldn't recognize him.
I doubt Bellatrix searched for a Hogwarts yearbook or student photos to identify people. She didn't ask who Neville Longbottom was, so she already knew when they arrived at the Department of Mysteries. That's the mistake. When Harry grabs the prophecy, Lucius and Bellatrix enter right away without masks, as you can see. Lucius removes his mask in a really cool scene, casting a spell with his wand so the mask dissolves. Bellatrix enters already unmasked, and they're right in front of Harry. Right in front of the group, right? When the other Death Eaters arrive and start surrounding them, there's a shot from above. It shows from an aerial view the Death Eaters surrounding them through all the corridors.
One problem remains. Lucius is the Death Eater in front of Harry.
And Bellatrix, who are without masks, are actually wearing masks, but technically they were without masks before. After they fall into the veil room, well, at the moment they fall. You notice that Ginny, her head is at the level of Harry's feet at first. But when the scene changes angle, they're about to get up. Ginny's head is at the level of Harry's knee. It changes completely. From one take to another, also in this scene, right, where they're in the death chamber. There, Harry is looking at the portal next to Luna, and the wound on his cheek has some blood running down.
In the next scene, when he says behind me for everyone to follow, the wound appears different. Just 2 small spots, no blood running down.
This mistake here is actually a question I have as well. Look at this. At this moment, all the Death Eaters grab Harry's friends and take them hostage. Harry is present with the prophecy. Lucius arrives, requests it, and Harry hands it over. Everyone stands in a circle, fully observing the scene.
Okay, there's the veil in the middle, and the ones behind it, on the other side, can't see, but the ones on the side can see what's happening.
And Sirius gets there, and simply no one does anything. No one says anything. No one gives a warning. It's just Sirius. Lucius takes the prophecy in his hand. There's a white flash, and everyone just waits for Sirius to punch Lucius. Like, okay. They did nothing since they had the hostage, ensuring Sirius wouldn't act. No warning, no lines, nothing. I get it, it's cool. Sirius showing up by surprise and punching Lucius in the face is cool. But it's still weird that nobody notices after Sirius ends up dying. Lupin holds Harry, and notice that when he goes to hold Harry, Harry's arm is under Lupin's arm.
Then, when there's a cut, Harry's arm is on top, and then in the next cut, his arm is under again.
In the scene where Dumbledore enters the Ministry of Magic through the fireplace, it's one of the coolest moments in the movies. It was foolish to come, but what a great scene. When he arrives at that moment, you can see that his hair is first behind his shoulders, But then, in the next take, his hair is completely in front. See? And our last mistake. We've already reached the last mistake. The last mistake that happens in the movie. At least from what I noticed. It happens when Luna is putting up the posters to look for her items, to get her things back. She tells Harry that things always return, though not always as expected. But then you see when it shows the sneaker hanging there, and it's the moment when she's talking, the actress's mouth isn't moving. Well, not always in the way we expect. Clearly, it's dubbed audio, and that happens a lot in the Harry Potter movies, at several moments, in several movies, right? But at times, the audio is dubbed over unrelated scenes, and the actor or actress isn't even moving their mouth. It's sometimes noticeable, but that's all. These are the mistakes I found in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. And man, if you wonder, wow, how do you find all these mistakes? First of all, the intention here is to find the mistakes. I watched the movie frame by frame to spot mistakes and check everything. Since these are old movies, many of the errors are already well known online. So it's not something that crazy, right? If you set out to watch the movie looking for real mistakes, not just making up mistakes. If you set out to watch frame by frame, looking for mistakes, analyzing everything, you can find them. And come on,
my job is to make videos about Harry Potter, so I'm dedicating myself there. So I'm watching the movie and looking for mistakes. It's the famous saying about looking for a hair in an egg, but here, we actually find them. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like, comment, and share.
If you can, support us by clicking the thanks button to help the productions here on the channel. Thank you very much. And also, if you want to become a member and get access to some exclusive benefits, you'll be very welcome too. Thanks. See you next episode of Cauldron Ferrado. Until then, mischief managed.